In my previous lecture, I shared with you the immense power of our psyche, which can even distort reality. Today, I want to talk about the other side of it. Reality can shape our psyche through interpersonal interactions. The obedience experiment. Why do good people turn into monsters? Undoubtedly, the most infamous experiment in the history of psychology is Milgram's obedience experiment. Yale University professor Stanley Milgram posted an advertisement in New Haven recruiting ordinary citizens to participate in a language learning experiment. Milgram had the participants play the roles of teacher and learner, with the teacher asking questions to the learner in another room who was strapped to a chair and responsible for answering. Milgram claimed that research showed that punishment would make the learner learn more effectively. Therefore, when the learner answered incorrectly, the teacher was instructed to manipulate a device to administer electric shocks to the learner, with the shock intensity increasing gradually. What the teacher did not know was that the learner was actually an actor hired by Milgram, and there were no real electric shocks. At the beginning of the experiment, the actor answered the questions correctly. Later, he began to make mistakes, so the teacher began to administer electric shocks according to the requirements of the experiment. When the voltage reached 75 volts, the learner inside began to scream in pain. I should add here that the safe voltage that the human body can withstand is around 36 volts, so the experiment voltage had clearly exceeded the safe range. When the voltage reached 120 volts, the learner inside said that he seemed to be having a heart attack and begged to stop the experiment. When the voltage reached 150 volts, the learner would scream in agony, lose consciousness, and no longer respond. Typically, the teacher would consult Milgram to ask if the experiment could be stopped. Milgram would only say, "You must continue." If the teacher refused to administer electric shocks to the learner inside after Milgram had said "you must continue" 3 times, the experiment would officially end. The question now is, when will the ordinary citizens who came to be teachers stop administering electric shocks to the learner inside when they hear the various screams and pleas? You can imagine that no one would want to abuse or even kill a stranger for a meager reward for participating in an experiment. However, the results of the experiment were shocking. 70% of people chose to continue administering electric shocks to the learner inside until they pressed the 300-volt shock button, by which time the learner inside appeared to be unconscious. You see, there were 70% of people. They were not a tiny minority of insane psychopaths. They were bankers, lawyers, and grocery store clerks who followed the rules, helped their neighbors, and were kind to others in society. But in Milgram's laboratory, they became insane killers, they became demons. So you must be wondering, what happened? What was the reason? Social psychology tells us that there are 2 possible explanations. The first explanation is obedience to authority. But how much authority can a stranger psychology professor have? Obviously, this is unreasonable. Psychologists have found a deeper reason, which is the second explanation, that we hope to be accepted by a group through obedient behavior. How to understand this? On the one hand, we are all independent individuals, but on the other hand, we are all social beings. Only in the framework of society, in the belonging of a group, can we define our own identity and find our own value. If you find this difficult to accept, let's take a look at our negative and positive emotions. Jealousy, sadness, anger, fear, shame, and loneliness are negative emotions that arise when we are questioned or abandoned by a group. Love, joy, pride, and happiness are positive emotions that arise when we are accepted by a group. But you may ask, will we do such outrageous things just because we are afraid of being abandoned by a group? The answer is yes. You doubt it because you don't know that being abandoned by a group is the greatest punishment for a person. To prove this point, there is an important experiment in the field of psychology. Psychologists asked participants to participate in a passing game. This experiment was conducted with both humans and computers. At the beginning, two little people passing the ball to each other would be displayed on the computer screen, and sometimes they would pass the ball to the participant. Slowly, the two little people in the computer would only pass the ball to each other, not to the participant. In other words, the participant was isolated. At this point, psychologists used functional magnetic resonance imaging to observe the participant's brain activity and found that the participant's insula began to activate. What is the insula? The insula is actually our pain center. For example, when you are stabbed with a knife, your insula will activate. When you are excluded from a social group, your insula, the pain center, will also activate, as if someone had stabbed you with a knife. No wonder people say that when people feel lonely, it is painful.